So let's get started. What is the LSO Marketplace and why did we develop it? It's simply a one-stop shop for all stakeholders of LSO APIs to find anything that they need relating to LSO APIs easily. Previously, we had very valuable materials, but they were sort of distributed and a little bit hard to find. And negotiating GitHub and navigating GitHub wasn't so easy, where a lot of our assets were also on the wiki, on our website, and so on and so forth. So the idea is just basically to make it easy to find it. So we created this microsite, this MEF microsite dedicated to the LSO Marketplace. And the sort of things that it provides are things like helping those that are building a business case for implementing LSO APIs, identify and access the LSO APIs, just find them very easily. Find the products and service payloads that can be blended with LSO APIs, and of course access all the valuable programs, especially the interoperability and onboarding, test service and certification of LSO APIs. Who is it intended for? Three major audiences: decision makers in service and technology provider companies who are weighing up the value proposition of implementing LSO APIs and explaining it internally and getting that buy-in from their management to enable automation of commercial and business outward-facing interactions with partners. And similarly, aimed at IT architects and developers tasked with implementing those LSO APIs. And finally, the QA and integration teams responsible for LSO API implementations. So let's take a tour of the LSO Marketplace. I'm juggling some screens here, so I hope you can see this is okay. This is our LSO Marketplace. And the URL for the LSO Marketplace is lso.mef.net. And I believe if you Google, it's pretty easy to find as well, LSO Marketplace. Let's see what happens here. And yeah, it's the second one on the list, not bad. There we go. So this is our marketplace. I'm going to take you through the homepage and talk about navigating through what to look for. You can see at the top we've got menu items, API Catalog, LSO Payloads, SDK Releases, blog, support. I'm going to come back to those afterwards once we've looked at the main page. Obviously, we've got a search button as well. For those of you that are looking for the login, there is no login. This is open to the general public. If there is any material that's only for MEF members, then that will be linked through to the wiki, which will require sign-in. But there's no login or sign-in here for the LSO Marketplace. So if we scroll down, we see that there are three boxes here: evaluating LSO APIs, implementing LSO APIs, and finding LSO APIs with appropriate buttons for each. The idea of the Evaluate LSO API box is for those companies that have heard about the LSO APIs and are trying to understand it a bit better. This is the start of their journey by clicking on Evaluate. They want to build a business case. They want to find out which partners they can partner with, find out who they can fast track their implementation with. So this first box is aimed at those business and product people. The middle box, implement, is aimed at the developers, those that once the decision has been taken to implement LSO APIs in the company, basically this is the start of their journey in the LSO Marketplace to find the materials that they need. And then the last box is really the shortcut. The LSO API Catalog will take the viewer to a catalog of all the LSO APIs, and we'll look at that shortly. One thing we want to highlight on the home page is that there are different stages in the journey, and the LSO Marketplace is really aimed at structuring it and making it easier to find what's required for each stage, starting with general interest, then that evaluation of whether to implement LSO APIs, building that business case, and then getting into the commitment, the development, the testing, the work, production work with one partner, then upgrading to multiple partners, and finally for those that want to certify. So this is the way we view the whole LSO API adoption lifecycle. Again, to make it easy, we've created 3 boxes for those that are looking for the LSO API functionalities, and that's the Lso API Catalog. We'll look at that shortly. The LSO Payloads. So for those of you that don't know, the LSO Payloads are the schema for the different products and services that can be blended with the LSO APIs. So we have a dedicated page for that. And then we have a dedicated page for the SDK Releases, and we'll look at that shortly. The test and certify LSO APIs here, this is very important because we've got two very valuable programs. One is for once the APIs are being implemented or have been implemented, being able to test against a virtual partner, an emulator in the cloud with the MEF-CECP service. So that will be very important for those more on the technical side. And then the product and technical people will be interested in the ability to certify LSO APIs. So that's a quick tour of the home page. And so let's go and have a look at that, evaluate LSO APIs. And one of the things I do want to emphasize at this point is that this is a continuous work in progress. Not only are the APIs, the payloads, the programs constantly evolving, but also this is the first time that we've had a dedicated website for this type of material. So we're constantly getting feedback on how to improve, and we'll talk about that, how you can help us with that, provide your feedback, and what we're working on at the moment. Also pulling in new content. So always work in progress, always things that we'd like to do better. And this page is no exception. We're still working on new material to add here, and you should always check back and see what the latest is. But the types of things that we've got here are things like the brief, the market brief for the whole concept of inter-provider service automation using LSO APIs, and the FAQs. That FAQ sheet can be very, very useful. We've also got 2 valuable white papers. One, the case for standardized and automated inter-provider business interface. That is really the introduction to the whole concept of using LSO APIs for a standardized open APIs for inter-provider, inter-partner business automation. And also, once that concept has been understood, there's another white paper with some valuable use case and value proposition material in there, the business and operational aspects of implementing LSO Sonata. I should, at this point, note that not all of the material is on the LSO Marketplace site itself. In some cases, this will take you to another website, typically the MEF public website, where we have a lot of the materials actually stored. So it's not optimal to have materials on 2 different sites. There's a technical reason for it. We're trying to minimize that jumping from one site to the other, but that is something you should be aware of, and we're working to mitigate that to the best of our abilities. And of course, there's a video that you can watch that also explains about the APIs. Another valuable tool here is the listing of those service providers that are implementing or have implemented LSO APIs, and we call that the LSO Partners Directory. And if I click on that, I'll just right-click on that and open it in a new window. That takes us to the public site, and what we see is the LSO Partners Directory. Now, it explains about the 4 levels of support. We currently have 3 of our members listed here. We're aiming to get about 20 or 20 plus. It takes a little bit of time to get the inputs, the data that can be published, but we've got a few examples here. So we can filter on which APIs are supported. So if we filter on who supports geographic address management, we can see it's all 3 of these Sparkle. We can also filter by company, and that takes us down to a dedicated page for that service provider that lists which APIs they support and the use cases within that API, which releases they support, and whether they support the actor side, the seller side, or both, and which product payloads. So, for example, we can see that PCW Global for order management supports release 3, and with these use cases on the seller side. But you compare that with the geographic address management, they're supporting Billy as well. And if we go and take a look at Sparkle, same idea. We can see here that they support buyer seller. They're currently on release 4, and all the details there. So this is in the LSO Partners Directory. We do have a form for those that want to also appear in the LSO Partners Directory. If you're implementing or have implemented LSO APIs, you can be in this directory. We want actually to maximize the information on who's available, which partners are implementing. You can see that you can still be here if you're in level 1, if you're only in development, or if you're already in production, or whether you may have achieved interop validation or even certification. In the case of Sparkle, for example, they are at level 404 because they have got certified already, whereas PCW Global and Colt are in production. Going back to the LSO Marketplace, we do want to actually make it easier to find which partners are supporting which APIs. So we're also going to add in another table, which I'll talk about afterwards in the backlog session, part of the presentation, where I will explain that rather than going and looking at the company and seeing all the APIs they support and the releases, we will also show which APIs are available and which service providers are supporting them. Another directory that we have is the Lso Api Solution Providers. And here we can see those partners that can fast track implementation. That means that if a service provider doesn't want to implement in-house, they can work with these partners, Amatis and Exu, ConnectBase, and use their solutions in combination with their own internal BSS and OSS. And again, same thinking here: which APIs are supported, seller, buyer, which release, and so on. So that's also found from the LSO Marketplace. So there we go. Last but not least, we have a box for finding the community manager, and I hope Michal will be able to present together with me shortly. Michal is our community manager. He manages the new releases. He provides support for those that are members that are implementing LSO APIs, and generally facilitates collaboration between MEF members. And so if you're making a decision about whether to implement LSO APIs, this page is very valuable. There's also news that might be relevant for those business and product people. So that was a very quick look at the evaluate box. Now if we go and look at the implement box, this takes us to a dedicated page for those that are working on implementing the LSO APIs. We see here a button to find the LSO API catalog easily. It's also in the menu up here. And it sort of talks you through the process, ready to implement, follow these key implementation steps, and go and look at the catalog, look at the developer guides, reference the business requirements and use cases, take a look at the test requirement standard, go and look at the LSO Payload Catalog, and review the MEF service model and MEF product model. So this is the process for finding the APIs that are relevant and downloading them. This is the one for finding information about that interop and onboarding testing, the MEF-IT service, and similarly for the Certify. And then how to connect with the API community. We've got that material here as well, and more of the technical updates and latest news for the implementers. So at this point, it's a good idea, I think, to go and look at the LSO API catalog. And this is essentially a gallery of all the APIs that are available in the LSO Marketplace. One of the feedbacks we got is we've got a filter box on the left, and the feedback was it's a little bit cryptic for those that aren't familiar with the LSO reference architecture and the reference points and so on. So we're going to make this a little bit easier to understand. But essentially, if you only want to look at APIs at the LSO reference point, which is, for those that aren't familiar with it, the reference point between the wholesale partners and the retail service provider, you just click on that, and that filters this down to the APIs that are available at LSO Sonata. We can see these LSO Sonata buttons, and then we can further filter if we just want to look at those LSO Sonata APIs in Selenium. So here we've essentially got the gallery. We see that there are 7 of these APIs: product inventory management, ordering management, quote management, geographic address management, product offering qualification, geographic site management, and trouble ticket management. So that's the gallery. So you can find the APIs per release, per interface reference point. You can do multiple reference points or releases. I'm just going to keep it simple and go back and focus on Sonata for Selenium. So, Michał, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take everybody through into the child pages for the LSO APIs. So this header is really just a cutoff of the beginning of the YAML file, and it talks about the information which developer guide is this a part of, this API, which business requirements is it implementing, a one-sentence description of what it does and which use cases. But these YAML files, the headers are actually going to be standardized so that the information will be a little bit more consistent between the APIs than it is at the moment. So expect to see that a little bit more consistent. But in any case, if you click on the API description, this takes you down to a more detailed page for each API. And okay, at this point, I'm going to hand off to Michał.
Okay, Daniel, if you could just make a step back and go into the ordering API, which will be much more suitable for an example.
Okay. Here we go, API description.
Okay, so if you're on the page, you see next to the name of the API on the top, we have the release label. In this case, it's Billy, and the IRP which is the LSO Cantata at this moment. Yes, so you always know what you are looking at. And we have a number, usually 4 tabs in this page. First is the API description, which is a high-level description of some context to this API. When we have the purpose explained, the status, whether this is a work in progress, which CFC is based, or whether it's letter ballot, so that is regarding the status of the API. We name and point to the business requirements and use cases, the number and the version for that release, because of course releases are points on time, and some documents have their maturity status at that point of time, so this is also noted here. So in this example, the ordering was based on MEF-CECP draft release 2 at the moment of the release. Then we have the link and the explanation of the developer guide. So that is MEF W123, LSO Cantata and LSO Sonata Product Order Management API Developer Guide. This is the title. A few words about what you will find in the developer guides. So for those of you that might not be yet familiar, is that we are not only providing the API specifications, we are providing this together with the developer guides, which contains data model diagrams, sequence diagrams, explanations, examples, so anything that is needed for the developer to better understand how to play with our APIs. And I think from Billy for sure release, we have the full coverage of the developer guides for our APIs in Sonata and Cantata. The payloads, here is a link to the LSO Payload Catalog, which we'll be talking further. So what kind of product can be supported with these APIs. And the last one here is the link to the test requirements. So we have this MEF 92.1 test requirement specification, which is also a living document that covers all of the use cases present in current release with throughout testing requirements on how to test your APIs. And also on the right-hand side, Daniel, please scroll a little up. We have some additional details, which are links to some pages already mentioned. We have the implementation support, which links to API solution providers. We have a link to the LSO partners directory and to the MEF onboarding and interop service. Information about the API certification and release information, which leads us back to the release info tab on the top, and to the broader also the link to the SDK's download page. And Daniel, the last one, please scroll down. And the API schemas, just to tell you to search for the API schemas in the tabs. And please show the tabs, Daniel.
Before we do that, Michal, I'm just going to quickly explain to everybody that there is a bit of a flow here between business requirements and use cases and beyond. So this is really, these are the standards that are very detailed, that are worked on for a long time, that really make the LSO APIs so robust. The LSO APIs are based on TM Forum APIs, but what we do is essentially we introduce a lot of the detail and the constraints that make it much easier and straightforward to interoperate with partners and essentially to standardize that interoperation. So the business requirements and the use cases are always the foundation of MEF standardized LSO APIs. So it's always good to know where it starts. This is the important reference to go back to and understand where these APIs come from. The next step in the process is the developer guide, which is essentially aimed at those that are implementing it, to give them an explanation of many of the different aspects of implementing the LSO APIs, what isn't found in the business requirements and use cases. So this is a very important asset when implementing the LSO APIs, whether or not you understand the underlying business requirements and use cases. The payloads are what are blended with the LSO API, so it's important to understand where to find them. And then finally, the test requirements, the next step in the life cycle is really those requirements which are testable in the business requirements and use case document, and which are testable and which are mandatory or optional. So this document, MEF-92.1, is also a very valuable document for those implementing. So I'll just go back and give you the microphone back, Michal, with the tabs.
Okay. So maybe let's start with the release notes, the last one. So this contains a very detailed information on what changed comparing to the previous release. And this is an accumulative release notes, so you can see the release notes from the Billy and all the previous also. So this is a detailed list per object type, per endpoint, or per attribute, what was changed, what was removed, what was added, a very detailed information. This is the list is going down, and less and less items are here as the APIs are progressing. 5 of our APIs don't have any changes comparing to the previous release. They are in the letter ballots phase, so the last step before being standardized. 2 are being worked on still, so there are some changes. Everything is documented here in this tab. And we have 2 tabs in between. We have the server side and the client side. Now, these names for server and client might be a little confusing, but that were the defaults we had in the system, and we are working on that. Generally, for example, in the Sonata or Cantata, we have 2 sides. We have the buyer and the seller, and there are endpoints that are provided by the seller to receive the request from the buyer. And on the opposite, there are endpoints to be exposed by the buyer to receive notifications. So the server side maps to the endpoints that were supposed to be exposed by the seller, and the client side is the tab that shows the YAML specification for the endpoints that were supposed to be exposed by the buyer for notifications. And this site is presentation of the YAML file. It is based on the Swagger Hub UI. It is just a little rebranded to match the MEF standards, but in general, if you're a developer, you will be very familiar to the content that is provided here. So on the beginning, you see the description, which, as Daniel mentioned, points to the numbers of the business requirements that this API is based on. It points to the number of the developer guide document that is explaining the functionality of this API, and lists all of the supported use cases. Followed by the copyright and also information about which TM Forum API this API is based on. And if you then scroll down, we have the listing of the endpoints, all of the operations. It's an easy way to see, browse what are the endpoints functionalities and so on. If you have ever used Swagger Hub UI, then or just Swagger, then you will be very familiar with that. That is just another style sheet applied to this way of presentation of the API specification.
Worth noting that this try it out button, we're going to be hiding it. It was a default with the platform that we chose, and we realized that at this point it's not so valuable, and so we're going to hide that. Again, we're learning as we go along, so there will be sort of tweaks here and there, and that's going to be one of them. And as Michal mentioned, we're going to get these tabs renamed so that they're appropriate for the interface reference point, for example, buyer side and server side if it's Sonata or Cantata. Would you like me to scroll down further, or have you covered everything here, Michal?
I think I've covered, yes, so let's continue.
Great. Okay then. So very good. So we've seen the API catalog. Thank you very much indeed for that explanation. Again, you've got that gallery you can filter. The next thing we want to look at is the LSO payloads. Now, the LSO payloads are the schema for products and services that can be blended with the generic functionalities of the LSO API envelopes, for example, quote and order. And we've got a landing page for this. We do want to turn this into a much better catalog type of page. That's work in progress. What's really important to see here is that there are three categories. MEF standardized LSO payloads, MEF endorsed LSO payloads, and partner specific LSO payloads. And right now we only have examples for MEF standardized LSO payloads, the classic access E-line product payload and subscriber Ethernet product payload, and then the internet access product payload that we've included in the SDKs, and more information to follow on that. Essentially, these payloads are always based on standards that have been developed in MEF that define the attributes and the service definitions, and then the service models that are derived from that. So potentially there could be others in the future, like the optical transport and network slice that's being developed now, and so on. So those would come under MEF standardized LSO payloads. The MEF endorsed LSO payloads are for those products and services that are not in scope for MEF that have been developed in other places, quite often other SDOs, but not necessarily. And in this case, the MEF endorsed LSO payloads, we've built a process where members can contribute data schemas and payload schemas rather for blending with the LSO APIs. One example that's under consideration now is SIP trunking service. So if you want to use the LSO APIs to transact SIP trunking services, that would be a candidate for a MEF-endorsed LSO payload. And the partner-specific LSO payload is very similar. It's just simply less rigorous in the sense that it doesn't require the documentation that the MEF-endorsed LSO payloads require. So the main thing to take away from this is that there will be more and more MEF-standardized LSO payloads here on the left. We're very interested in hearing from anybody that wants to have payloads listed on the LSO Marketplace going through one of these two processes, either MEF-endorsed LSO payloads, and it's explained here, or partner-specific payloads. And it's just worth perhaps just for 1 minute just showing you that actually Michal has contributed into MEF what we call the Lso Payload Handbook, and this is currently in peer review. And what the Lso Payload Handbook does is it explains everything about MEF standardized, MEF endorsed and partner specific payloads, what the difference between them is. And then it lays out for those that want to contribute MEF endorsed LSO payloads, what level of documentation would be required and how to do that. So that's all captured in this payload handbook, which we'll make available once it's been peer reviewed on the LSO Marketplace. So we've looked at the API catalog, we've looked at the LSO payloads. Let's take a quick look at the SDK releases. Here on one page we have everything about the different releases. As you can see, we started with Aretha with the formal naming system, the alphabetic naming system, which started with Aretha in December of 2020. Billy in June of 2021. We just came out with the Celine release in January, and the next ones will be Dolly, Ella, and Fergie. And if you click on, for example, Celine, it will take you down here so that you've got these very convenient zip files for downloading the API, the SDKs. One thing that's worth noting is that we have a number of interface reference points in the LSO reference architecture: Sonata, Cantata, Legato, Allegro, Interlude, Presto. each interface reference point has a set of APIs. So there is one SDK per interface reference point. So we have the Sonata SDK with the Selene release, and we have the Sonata SDK Billy release, and so on. And you can download these. The difference between the public and the extended is that there may be member-only materials in the extended version that aren't available to the general public. So if you're a MEF member, you can download the extended version. I think we're working now to converge those so that everything will be in the public domain. More on that will be posted here on the LSO Marketplace.